In today's gaming ecosystem, great movement in video games is taken for granted. We see tedious, uninteresting walking segments to intrude upon scenes of action. We see the segmentation of game spaces behind load times or cutscenes. We see high resolutions that make for fantastic screenshots but show a buggy, laggy mess when the picture starts moving. It makes it all seem that movement is something archaic or valueless, something that today's gaming culture doesn't really need. Stagnancy is not just an occurrence, it's a symptom. The recent developments in the industry make the symptom even easier to detect. The current trend of looking good as opposed to moving good is one that's crippled the identities of series for years. Perhaps it's the current culture's obsession with quantity over quality. Games come out with huge worlds but with little to do in them, and no navigation to accommodate that size. We're still seeing both old and new franchises have us traverse enormous maps back and forth, but without any of the payoff. And it leaves me wondering, if a game demands that you move from location to location so much, why can't that movement be satisfying and fulfilling on its own? That satisfaction and fulfillment ties into something I referred to in one of my older videos. I mentioned something called the joy of motion, defining it as a phenomenon in games where the simple act of moving around is fluid and engaging, regardless of the context in which it stands. It doesn't matter where this motion is occurring or why, you just need to be enjoying that you're doing it. But games that master movement to that level are not as plentiful as we may think. There's a strong difference between a game with functional movement and a game that takes things one step further. You could call it game feel, but it doesn't help that describing how a game's movement feels is as postmodern and ambiguous as it gets. Whether it's the speed of the movement, or its responsiveness, or even something like its animation or sound, recreating the joy of motion is tricky, but when it happens, we know it. Enter the Capcom 5, and with it, one of the greatest definitions of movement I've ever seen in gaming.
Oh, me?